What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so with the Action Comics Revenge storyline coming out later today, what I wanted to do in this is basically run over like the prelude for it. And this is kind of interesting because DC's doing this in a pretty intriguing way. For the most part, DC's played it pretty close with regards to the character story arcs being confined within the characters. And so what you end up getting instead of these, massive crossovers, are like these, two story crossovers, so to speak, which is basically the Suicide Squad crossing over with Superman. And that's one of the cool things here, because initially this picks up with Lex Luthor. Now remember, in the first story that we covered, because really we didn't really need the second story, it couldn't hurt, but we didn't really need the second story. The first one, called the Black Vault, that was the most important. And what this did is it focused on the idea that Amanda Waller, as leader of the Suicide Squad, or I guess the head of the Suicide Squad, had gained information that there was basically a Black Vault, which is a portal to the Phantom Zone, the prison for Kryptonians that was residing in Russia. And the idea was to basically break into this Russian prison, steal the Black Vault, bring it back to Belle Reef Prison where the Suicide Squad operates out of, and then see what they could do with it. And of course, this eventually led to the death of Captain Boomerang, which of course he ended up coming back. But the idea here is that once the Black Vault was secured by Amanda Waller, they basically discovered that General Zod had come with it. And so General Zod is effectively Superman. I mean, he's just Superman by different means. He's got the same strength, speed, durability, so on and so forth, but he's also got a level of tactical expertise that Superman doesn't have, because before General Zod was imprisoned in the Phantom Zone, he was the general of Krypton's armies. And for Amanda Waller, as the head of the Suicide Squad, the goal is to basically bolster the team's ranks in a way to where it can be this virtually undefeatable team whenever it is that it's designed to carry out a mission of some sort. And so for her, acquiring General Zod was just as good, if not better, than forcing Superman onto the Suicide Squad. The problem with this is that cooperation from the various members of the Suicide Squad is guaranteed when Amanda Waller has a bomb planted inside of their brains. With General Zod, they can't just plant a bomb in his brain because he's virtually indestructible. If they were to plant a bomb inside of his brain and then detonate it, nothing would happen. I mean, it'd probably scramble his brains a little bit, but he would certainly live, and then all hell would be paid. And so because of that, the idea was for Amanda Waller to basically find a way to take General Zod and make him her prisoner. And so what this does is this picks up after that original story, and it has her meeting with Lex Luthor. Now this is cool because remember, Amanda Waller is just as sinister and cruel as she is cunning and intelligent. And that's what makes her so formidable, is because she does what needs to be done in order for her to achieve her goal. With Lex Luthor, remember, in this new 52, or at least in the DC Rebirth iteration of his character, Lex Luthor is a good guy. He basically took up the mantle of Superman after the original New 52 Superman died, and the classic Superman took his place. Now, of course, this led into beef between the two of them, and whether or not Lex Luthor was actually a good guy, and so on and so forth, but we know he is. But Lex Luthor is basically just kind of offering, or at least he believes he's offering, some measure of distraction for Amanda Waller, when it's actually the other way around. And the reason why is because the Suicide Squad is actually breaking into Lex Luthor's building for the purpose of accessing something. Now, what that something is, we don't find out right off the bat. Instead, it's just kind of like this quid pro quo going back and forth between Amanda Waller and Lex Luthor, this little bit of a bickering, different things like that, but nothing super significant. The cool thing about this, though, is that it does hit home at the idea that because of Lex Luthor's resources combined with his intelligence, he knows a lot of things that people don't expect him to know. The reason I say this is because remember, the Suicide Squad is a Black Ops team. They're supposed to be in and out, and no one was supposed to know they were there. For the most part, the Suicide Squad is known around the world. The issue is when the Suicide Squad goes in and they commit an act, was it them or was it somebody else? And that's really the question that's always left lingering, at least at the intention of Amanda Waller. Now, of course, we end up finding out that this particular object that the Suicide Squad is looking for is kryptonite. And the reason why we know this is because of the fact that once they break in, Lex Luthor immediately picks up on the fact that they're there. The other half of this is this also ties into the origin of Bizarro Superman. And it's kind of a cool thing. Remember, back when the New 52 first started and Lex Luthor was a bad guy, he was trying to find ways to basically create a clone of Superman. And he ended up creating all these different iterations, which went into the origin of Bizarro Superman. Bizarro Superman was just this imperfect version of Superman that Lex Luthor had made, but it was the closest thing that he could get to. What this does is it gives us all these different versions versions of Superman Lex Luthor had made when he was going through the cloning process, through the gene, manipulation process. Now, of course, for the most part, the Suicide Squad is able to hold their own to a degree. With Lex Luthor becoming aware of the fact that they're there, he immediately races off and things unfold exactly as we would expect to. But of course, this leads to Lex Luthor basically revealing to Amanda Waller that he knows why they're there, that they're looking for kryptonite. Now, of course, the reason why Amanda Waller and her group are looking for kryptonite is because in order for them to make General Zod their guy, in order to basically force him into the Suicide Squad, they need a way to be able to plant a bomb into his brain, and that if it detonates, that it'll kill him. And green kryptonite will make that happen. The other half of this is that we also get a little more information on the character of Harcourt. Now remember, Harcourt we talked about in the last video, I think it was, and she's someone who was basically introduced as part of the Suicide Squad, but we didn't know anything about her. All we knew is that she was there to basically be the liaison between the Suicide Squad and the federal government. But her allegiances, who it was that she answered to directly, different things like that, we didn't really know any of that. All we knew is that Amanda Waller answered to her and Harcourt answered to somebody else. Now, of course, this created a bit of strain between Amanda Waller and Harcourt just because of the fact that Waller doesn't like answering to anybody in particular. But what ends up happening here is they send out General Zod on his first mission alongside the rest of the Suicide Squad to basically track down the Annihilation Brigade. Now remember, the Annihilation Brigade was the team that the Suicide Squad first encountered when they broke into the Russian prison to steal the Black Vault and General Zod in the first place. And so because of this, what this tells us is that while the Suicide Squad has tried to maintain some level of clandestine nature, ultimately the world has become aware of who they are. And ultimately what ended up happening here is that there was a group called the People who have basically created the Suicide Squad, but done it in a multitude of different places. And so it's really like this international group with these different hubs all over the place. And so that's one of the big, huge drawbacks of Amanda Waller, and that's one of the huge impacts that we've talked about in previous videos. It was only a matter of time before people learned about the Suicide Squad, and it was only a matter of time before they tried to duplicate it or tried to copy it or something along those lines. Now, of course, in response to this, we end up learning that Harcourt is basically a spy for the People. Now, she is a legitimate agent, but she's basically a double agent. She's operating, as part of the federal government, feeding information to the People organization. And of course, we end up learning that the person who was running this Russian prison was a person by the name of Director Carla, and ultimately she just ends up, passing this information to her superior, presumably, and, informing them on General Zod and the various weaknesses that he has and so on and so forth. But again, what this does is it creates a bit of tension for the squad. And the reason why is because of the fact that, remember, despite the fact that the various members of the Suicide Squad have been shanghaied onto the team, ultimately, they still have allegiances to one another and they still have a human side. Harley Quinn is just, she's bat crazy. But at the same time, she's also still somewhat of a caring human being. And while they're in this prison, General Zod just kind of loses his mind, runs awry, attacks one of the members of the Annihilation Brigade, who can just let off these massive explosions, effectively detonates the guy, and obliterates the entirety of this Russian prison. The result of this is that both Harley Quinn and Rick Flag are kind of struck by the fact that all these lives have been lost as a result of their actions as the Suicide Squad. Now, again, this isn't really anything new. It's really the first time that we're kind of seeing like Harley Quinn and Rick Flag really get together, but it is kind of important in the sense that it shows the human side of the characters. And that's one of the things that's really easy to forget when it comes to the Suicide Squad, that they're just villains who were just kind of brought together and forced to operate as a team and so on and so forth. Now, the other half of this is Harcourt and Waller. And that's the cool thing about this. Remember, Amanda Waller is smart, cunning, ruthless, the whole 9 yards, and she immediately picked up on what Harcourt was doing, the fact that Harcourt was a double agent. Now, Amanda Waller did not initially know who Harcourt was working for, but with Amanda Waller's contacts, with her information coming out of the federal government, if she's tasked with a superior, then you better believe Amanda Waller's going to do every ounce of investigation she can find on that particular person. And with the character of Harcourt, she basically deduced that Harcourt has no allegiances to anybody in the government, that nobody knows anything about Harcourt. She's just there one day, and so she's effectively some kind of a spy or something along those lines. And so the result was that when Harcourt had basically gone down into the science area of the of Belle Reve prison and killed all those different science officers, and then in turn sent her message out to Director Carla, that Amanda Waller put just enough bullets in there for her to kill those members of the science officers and then have no bullets left. And so this of course allows for Harcourt to be overpowered, or at least to be taken out by Captain Boomerang. Now, the other half of this is again Harley Quinn and Rick Flag. The two of them basically share romantic interest with one another. And that's one of the cool things here, is because again, it's very much the human side of the Suicide Squad, who are just trying to find some measure of happiness in a life that's otherwise devoid of any real happiness whatsoever. And so of course, this also shows us that General Zod is pretty ruthless in the sense that his motivation is to re-access the Black Vault, find a a way to retrieve people who are inside and then bring them out into the world. Now, the way this is done is really, really cool, because on the surface, it seems like he just wants to free these various members of Krypton's armies and conquer the world. But what we're actually going to find out in another story later on is that there's a far deeper motivation to this. There's something a lot more personal that he's trying to get out of there. So it's really cool. But what this does is it leads to him basically incinerating the bomb inside of his own head, literally using his heat vision, reflecting it off a mirror and destroying the bomb in his head. And so again, it's really kind of cool because it shows us the lengths that he's willing to go to in order to achieve his goal. Now, of course, with him basically incinerating the bomb in his own head, one can't help but scream when you're shooting lasers into your skull. So of course, the rest of the Suicide Squad hears the whole thing along with Amanda Waller, and they all basically respond. Now, the reason for this is because remember, this is General Zod, and General Zod is fairly new to the Suicide Squad, to say nothing of the fact that when they first encountered him, he basically almost defeated the entirety of the squad himself and then some. And so of course, if he's gone awry, if he's lost his mind and they attempt to detonate this bomb, the hope is that it'll kill him, only for them to find out that he removed the bomb from his own head. And so what it means now is there's no conventional means for them to stop General Zod. They are effectively helpless at his whim. Now, the Suicide Squad jumps in, they all arrive just in time in order to be able to, try to stop Zod. But that's really about it. The best they can hope to do is keep him at bay. And the reason for this is because what he begins doing is basically releasing all these Phantom Zone wraiths, basically these spirits of people who have been imprisoned in the Phantom Zone, and allow them to just kind of run amok and start attacking things. Now, of course, this coincides with the arrival of Cyborg Superman Hank Henshaw and the Eradicator. Now, remember, in the events leading up to Action Comics Revenge, what this did is it gave us this notion that somebody had been going around and somebody had been bringing together the various enemies of Superman. Of course, we ended up having Blank, one of the most notable enemies, who has just an insane amount of telepathy and telekinesis, but we don't know anything about him. Mongol, who's basically this long-time enemy of Superman, who's tried to defeat him on a multitude of occasions, as well as Metallo, a guy who's basically, used as a kryptonite heart, one of Superman's most notable enemies as well. But of course, this was revealed to be Hank Henshaw himself, who was bringing them around. Now, if you're new here, the long and short of this, and the only thing you really need to worry about, is that Cyborg Superman is probably Superman's most formidable enemy, probably his most dangerous enemy, just because of the fact that so long as his computer components are intact, Cyborg Superman cannot truly die. He can always be reassembled. And so again, that's one of the things that makes him so dangerous here. Now, of course, General Zod does not see them as legitimate. He doesn't see them as guys that are like, hey, look, you guys can be my allies. You guys can be on my side. General Zod is a pure Kryptonian. He believes that only pure Kryptonians have the right to lead the Kryptonian army. And so again, when he looks at Cyborg Superman, he's like, you're not a real Kryptonian. You're like a machine hybrid. When he looks at the Eradicator is artificially created and possessed by the souls of countless Kryptonians. When it comes to General Zod himself, he is a genuine Kryptonian. And that's one of the reasons why Zod had always harbored this sort of hatred toward Superman himself, because Superman's family were ones that basically led to General Zod being imprisoned in the first place. General Zod popping up here is for the purpose of just bringing Krypton back. And that's one of the reasons why his character is so cool, because it's not that unreasonable. General Zod is not like a Nazi, right? He's not like, oh man, only pure bloods, only the pure race. Not at all. For him, Krypton's been destroyed. His allegiance is to Krypton, the Kryptonians, restoring his planet back to its rightful place. If he can't bring Krypton back in the traditional sense, then he can very well inhabit the Earth with Kryptonians. But again, that's the surface explanation. His intention, the whole reason why he wants to get back into the Black Vault, is a lot more personal. With this Black Vault serving as the source of all these wraiths, as well as General Zod feeding on its power to a degree, their attempts to basically take out the Black Vault aren't necessarily the most successful. And so what Rick Flag ends up doing is traveling directly into the heart of the Black Vault itself, and then effectively destroying it with grenades and so on and so forth. Now again, the Black Vault is basically a portal to the Phantom Zone, but it's basically destroying the portal doorway. That's really all it is. It's all the purpose of the Black Vault serves. And so because of this, Rick Flag is presumed to have been killed. Now, we don't know his final fate. That final fate's not given to us. He's just inside the Phantom Zone. Now, most likely he's just an incorporeal spirit or something along those lines, but remember, he had those grenades in his hand when they went off, or at least that's what we saw. And so the presumption is that he's effectively killed. Now, again, the reason why I say this is so personal for General Zod is because of the fact that with the Black Vault gone, with the portal to the Phantom Zone gone, he effectively just gives up. And all he says is, they're gone. He just really kind of falls and says, that's it, they're gone, I give up. But the cool thing about this is that while he does leave with Cyborg Superman and the Eradicator because they promise him a way to gain access to the Phantom Zone, one of the things that General Zod tells Amanda Waller is that she has no no earthly clue how close she was to wiping out the whole of humanity. And that's really one of the things that the story hits really hits in the heart when it comes to Waller herself. Waller, despite her intelligence, her cunning, at the end of the day, she's largely blinded by her own arrogance and her own ambition. She wants to win. That's what it is. And she'll do whatever it takes to win. But it's not really until after the circumstances are over, after she's hit a moment of panic, that she begins to realize, oh my God, everything could have gone awry. Now, these feelings of uncertainty, these feelings of a lack of confidence are masked by Amanda Waller's personality. She never reveals to the Suicide Squad that she's not sure that what she's doing is the right thing. And that's why this is so cool, is because it gives us this other side of Amanda Waller that we never really see. Amanda Waller's hard, she's ruthless, she's cunning, she's cruel, but on the inside, she questions every step she makes. She questions every decision she makes. Is she doing the right thing? What happens if the Suicide Squad goes left instead of right? If they go left, the Earth is saved. If they go right, the entire Earth is destroyed. All that stuff, the whole of humanity walks on a knife's edge, and at any point, it could all come crashing down because of a stupid decision that Amanda Waller made. And so again, that's a crazy thing, because now the question the Suicide Squad has is, if Rick Flag is dead, and Rick Flag is the field commander, and he's the only one who is intelligent and reasonable, then who in God's name is going to lead the Suicide Squad now? But with that being said, guys, if you are new here to Comments Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Yeah, this goes directly into Action Comics Revenge, just because this focuses on why it is that General Zod joins the Revenge Squad in the first place. So again, I wanted to throw this in there, and I'm going to throw this into the Superman playlist as well, just so people have an idea of where General Zod came from. We'll also throw the first Suicide Squad video in there too. Anyway, guys, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I will catch you all later. Peace.